to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Jacob-Kashiwagi. And he's here to share with us his new book, NoInfluence Mentoring, Understanding Teenagers and Encouraging Their Success. So if you're a parent, teacher, coach, or mentor, you know how challenging it could be to work with teenagers. Based on 28 years of leadership development research pioneered at Arizona State University, Dr. Jacob-Kashiwagi helps teenagers find direction and confidence. Now, Dr. Kashiwagi is a thought leader in leadership development, procurement, project management, and supply chain management. He worked alongside his father, Dr. Dean Kashiwagi, to co-develop the best value approach through a global research effort. Their groundbreaking model is the most licensed technology out of Arizona State University in the past 20 years and has been tested in over 2,000 projects valued over $2 billion with a 98% success rate. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Jacob-Kashiwagi.
Thank you so much, Marianne.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. So what inspired you to even research or look at this topic in a new way?
Amazingly, my background is in industrial engineering. And as I went into industrial engineering, I learned a concept that was very different than what I had learned about leadership. Growing up, I was taught leadership was all about motivation. It was all about trying to influence others and help people increase their capability. And as I went into industrial engineering, I found out that many of the ways that organizations and businesses were able to improve their performance was not about trying to change people at all or even motivate people, but it was about understanding who they were and putting them in the right place. And so industrial engineering is all about process. It's all about looking and analyzing at what's causing inefficiency. And to fix it, it's all about not trying to change people, but change the system that they're working in to help them out. And when I realized what was going on, I started to realize that businesses are actually to improve themselves and be better and higher performing. They're not trying to change people. And the greatest business leaders, they do not try to change people, but they try to identify who people are and create a great organization to allow them to flourish. And so in learning this, I did my master's degree all about how leadership is not based on influence, but it's based on alignment. And so as I studied more and more and I realized what great leaders did, I started to realize that when we go down to education and the mentoring of youth and the leading of youth, especially high school kids, that what we're actually doing is very opposite of what research and business has found to be successful, which is instead of trying to influence and change the youth, what we need to be doing is allowing the youth to figure out who they are and creating a good structure that allows them to use their strengths to do something of great value.
So that's what you mean by no-influence mentoring, is that we're developing just what the youth are interested in?
Yes, it's all about, instead of trying to tell the youth, this is what you have to learn, this is how you have to learn it, this is what's going to make you successful in life, allowing the child to identify what they're interested, who they are, what they're good at, and then shaping all of our resources to help them be able to develop that and figure that out.
What an inspiring way to come about a new way of looking at things. And I think it's so empowering for young people. Ask like what inspires them, what brings them, what excites them in life, and then going from there.
Yes, it's really interesting when I look back at my life and what really caused me to want to share this no influence mentoring. Um, it actually goes back to growing up in my family. I come from a family of 8 children, so I had 7 siblings. And my father was an industrial engineer. And so when he first started our family, he does what every parent does, which is in order to manage 8 children, you have to have a lot of rules. You have to tell them what to do. You have to tell them what's acceptable. Especially in an Asian family, the only acceptable grade is an A, right? You need to be doing really well in academics. It was very important. And about when my oldest brother was 19 years old, my father looked in his eyes and asked him, well, now you're an adult. What are you going to do? And he saw a blank stare that my oldest brother had been told what to do for so long. He got great grades. His SAT scores, his standardized test scores were amazing, off the chart. But he didn't know how to make his own decisions. He didn't know how to utilize what he was good at to do something of value in society. And it kind of was a very eye-opener for my father. When he was the oldest of 8 kids, he was 19, my oldest brother, and the youngest was 4 years old. I was right in the middle. I was about 11, 12 years old at the time. And my father decided to do something that was very drastic, which was he decided to release all rules. And instead of telling us what we had to do, to let us choose what we wanted to do. And when you're talking about a 4-year-old going out, not having a curfew, being able to do anything he really wanted, it's kind of a big leap forward. But it was a very good scenario for me to look at and see what happened. You would think that the youngest children who didn't have to do anything, they were excused from going to school if they didn't want to go to school. They didn't have to do any family activity. They didn't really have to do anything they didn't want to. They played video games for most of their childhood, and they had no restrictions on a time limit for how much video games they could play. And what we ended up finding out as we got older, and now the youngest is about almost 30 years old, is that the younger children in my family were able to become more responsible, more creative, more innovative, and more successful at a younger age than the older children did. And so for me, as I watched this, I couldn't believe it. And for me, it's been the only way I've seen to truly help a child and a student develop from all the different models I've seen.
What an empowering story, because you think that you let kids do whatever they want. They're eating ice cream all day and, and responsibility is gone. But it really shows quite, while there could be some of that, it shows that there's quite a different response that happens as well.
Yes, we for the longest time, we thought my 2 younger siblings would become spoiled, rotten brats, good for nothing. And that's kind of what it looked like all the way up till they were about freshmen in high school. But it's really an interesting thing because people don't realize in order for people to develop, they have to make their own mistakes. You have to give them room to do that. And the best time for children to make mistakes is when they're children, not when they grow up to be adults and they have so much more at stake and so much more responsibility. And so what we found out with my younger siblings is they made all their mistakes when they were young and when the mistakes didn't matter. And as they got older, they learned quickly from them. And so by the time they got to high school, they went to service projects, not because my parents forced them to, but because they wanted to. They studied and went to bed early. not because they had a rule placed upon them, but because they wanted to, because they realized what was required to be successful. And so it's quite an amazing thing for me to watch.
I'm sure your older sibling looks at everything and goes, "Hey, why wasn't this instituted when I was born?" You know?
It is true that there is quite a bit of that in my family.
Well, I understand you discuss also that, when teaching children and young adults, that the lessons should be simple. Why is that?
Uh, the answer for that is very simple, because people don't learn a lot when things are complex.
Well, there you
The,
go.
more, the more you require someone to use their head and to use their brain, the harder it's going to be on them, the less they're going to learn. And that's really the whole reason why. We don't want to have to make someone think. And this is something education has gotten really wrong. We believe that a child should think, that they should use their brain more, that they need to use that capacity. But in reality, the more you require a child to do that, the less they learn, because they don't understand it. It requires more time, and it brings more risk in their life. Because if it's simple, there's no thinking, there's no decision making. They know exactly what the right answer is every single time. But as soon as it gets complex, they have to think about it. As they think about it, they have to make a decision. Every time you give a child a decision, the chances of them picking the wrong choice is very high. So you're basically teaching them a model that brings risk into their life.
Well, that is very interesting how that comes about. And my goodness, I mean, your father was really a pioneer in really cultivating children that aren't only successful but are more fulfilled, it sounds like, because when you have the ability to go ahead and choose what brings you joy and passion in life, we need more people like that doing the jobs that they love.
Yes, especially now more than ever. In the age of automation, any job where you have to be told what to do, it's being automated. And so as our children grow up, as students grow up, they truly have to learn to be able to be a leader in life. They have to know what to do without being told. They have to be able to see without someone having to explain things to them. And that's not what our education system is trying to create right now, but it should be. It should be what every teacher and every leader is trying to cultivate in the youth, which is knowing what to do without someone telling you what to do, being able to see it without someone having to explain it.
I think that's so important. When I was growing up, I was much like your older brother when, my parents were like, okay, so you graduate in high school, what do you want to do? And I was just drawing a blank. And then you're feeling really pressured because you're having to make these very serious choices at kind of a young age.
Yes. Unfortunately, it's what most adults are trying to get children to do. Make a decision. Here's a million options. Make a decision on what you're going to do for the rest of your life when you're 19 years old, 17 years old, with no experience, no understanding of what's going on, which is not a very good situation to be in.
Yeah, that's as much stress as a person can take. It's like you're going to do this for the rest of your life, and for kids, that seems like it's such a huge decision because they don't really realize it's like, well, you can make changes along the way if you choose.
Yes, and that stress and the worry that comes with it and the pressure that comes with it. A lot of people are wondering why mental instability and issues are occurring, why the rise in depression and suicide is so rampant nowadays. And that's really the reason is the pressure and the stress that comes from that type of environment. And it's a very sad thing to watch.
So I know in your book you also talk about the importance of action. So how does this interplay with being able to take things at a simple pace, but that kind of encourage and motivate the young people?
I call it the difference between the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. The bottom-up approach is a traditional education and mentoring. It's we're going to teach you all of these different things in the world, and there's a million of them, right? There's a lot of different areas of life, specialties, whatever it might be. And we're going to try and give you a little bit of each of them. So hopefully when you grow up, you have enough of this to be able to figure out what's going on. But that makes things very complex, because if you look at all the information in the world, you start to realize there's too much for one person to know, too much for one person to understand exactly what's going on. But the way you simplify this is you go from the top down. The top down is realizing that instead of trying to figure everything out in all the details, all you have to do is help a child understand who they are. And once the child understands who they are, then their decisions become simple because there's only one choice for them. Someone's not going to be a doctor, a policeman, a lawyer. They're not going to be all of these things at once, right? So they don't need all of these different skills in the world. They only need to know the skill set that aligns to what they do. If they're a singer, for example, they won't need to know a lot of mathematics. They won't need to know a lot of statistical analysis. In fact, most of what they're going to do is mainly with their voice and musical theory. And so when you focus on the top-down approach, what you're doing is you're letting the child figure out who they are, learn who they are. And you're focusing on another thing I call natural laws. Natural laws is basically patterns in life that if you learn, it applies to everywhere in life. So for example, law of gravity, you learn the law of gravity. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It's always going to work, and it always helps you to understand what's going on around you physically. And one of these natural laws that's, I think, the number one thing a child needs to develop when they're young is the ability to change. A lot of times we don't realize how important this is. But when a child learns to change, it allows them to be flexible. It allows them that no matter where they go, they understand how to improve very quickly, whether they want to be a lawyer or a dancer, whatever it might be. And so when you let the child focus on who they are, and you use that child's strengths to let them develop the ability and to learn how to change, you have one powerful person. So let me give you an example. Say a child, they don't know who they want to be when they're growing up, but they love video games. That's the bane of every parent's existence is video games with their child. But if the child learns how to continually improve at playing their video game and learns the process of becoming the best, that's a skill set that even though they applied it to video games, it's the exact same process it takes to become the best lawyer, engineer, doctor, is the ability to go into some place and learn how to develop and change very quickly in it. And so when you go from the top-down approach, instead of trying to teach technical skills, memorization, you're allowing the child to learn these overall patterns and ideas in life and learn about themselves. And it's something that now you don't have to give them all of these different things, give them all these experiences in all of these different occupations. You just let them figure out who they are and whatever they like to develop the skill set in that. And as they grow up and they actually figure out what they want to do, they have the skill set needed to become better than anyone else the quickest at it.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I thought that that was so empowering because it really is a whole new dynamic when we look at, how to not only raise children, but how to educate them. And I'm so glad that we also had that little voice in the background chiming in to share her thoughts or his thoughts on it as well.
My apologies. That is my 1-year-old son.
Aw, well, do you know what? And it's important. You had a lot to say about that, and I think that it's important to chime in as well too. Yeah. So, but
Yes.
and I think that a lot of times when people look at like how we raise our kids, they never look at what empowers them and what drives them, and that's what I found just so impressive about your book, No Influence Mentoring, because it's really a whole new paradigm when we look at education and empowerment and giving them choices to make so that they can be better people in life.
Yes. A lot of times when we're adults, we forget what it's like to be a child. And so our expectations of what children have to do and what they have to learn is so much greater than what we actually understood and knew when we were their age. And it's so tough for us to sit back and just let them figure it out and have that faith in them that they will figure it out as they go through life. We want to intervene too much, I think.
Well, that's true. They tell boys go out and play, and young boys, they throw rocks at each other. And usually parents are very protective about the girls. So there's totally different life experiences that both children end up having. And, you look at this and go, gosh, I think we shelter our children way too much.
Yes, like my 1-year-old son, even at his age, the reason he cries is because we just let him do what he wants. And yes, he hurts himself sometimes. And we'll, of course, make sure he never is in danger to the point of harming himself, beyond being able to live and maiming himself or something like that. But I like to give him free rein. He goes where he wants to go. He looks at what he wants to look at. And it's the most amazing thing is I don't put up a guardrail in our stairs unless I'm not watching him. And I'll let him get all the way close to the stairs. And he's learned that if he goes too far, he's going to fall. And so now, being about 15 months, he's very careful. He can go up and down by himself. He doesn't need to be watched really anymore. And it's really an amazing thing to watch how he develops very quickly when he is able to have his own failings and to fall when he needs to fall and just see the natural laws play out in his own life and learn those patterns himself.
Yeah, you could probably see where he's really, making these decisions going, no, I'm not going to do that. That hurts. And he's already learned these things, and it's interesting. You look at young people today, a lot of them have been so sheltered that they're actually learning a lot of lessons that they probably should have learned when they were younger in their 20s because life has been such a has been sheltered and catered for them. In many ways. And you hear that quite often. So I think having a new way of looking at, how we raise children and how we interact with them, how groundbreaking is that?
And it's the most amazing thing because children, they learn more, and parents, they actually don't have to do as much. It's an easier model that works better. But it does require that willingness to release control.
And just be okay with that. So if, when we look at no influence mentoring, if it had a purpose or a goal, what would those be?
I think the main purpose behind or objective and goal behind me writing this book is to help students. I have been in education at all levels now in my career, beginning at teaching college and teaching the top 10% of students at Arizona State University, which were honor students, coming from multiple degree programs, now to teaching high school students and mentoring them, and also junior high students. I saw the mental instability, how these students couldn't sleep at night, the stress and the expectations put upon them, and how as they develop, they don't know who they are. They don't know what their value is, and the depression they go through because of that. I wanted to be able to help them, actually, and the only way to help them is to educate the adults and the leaders who are impacting their lives, and who can provide them more support. And so I think that was my main motivation and objective behind this.
Where do you think people get hung up the most? What's one thing that maybe they have challenges with?
I think the biggest issue I've seen in parents and leaders is that they feel if they release control, then the child is going to go crazy. That their ability to understand is so low that unless someone's telling them what to do, they're going to do absolutely nothing with their life. And they're going to grow up to not know how to respect people, not know how to work hard, not know how to accomplish good grades and get a good job, and not be able to be stable in their life. It's the perception of many adults that I've interacted with. And I think that's the biggest issue we encounter, is what we think in our mind, and our fear of what our child or what our student will do if we don't tell them what to do.
When you're working with students and their families, what's the number one thing that you see shifts immediately when the parents give them this type of freedom? Is there one thing in particular?
There's a couple of things people should know if they're going to do this. One, the child is going to fail. Some children have higher capabilities than others, but if you have been involved and doing a lot of work in your child's life, then of course, if you release control and you let the child be on their own level, of course they won't do as well. So that's the first thing, is to know if you do release control, you have to be comfortable with the level your child is at. And the second thing is be prepared to be amazed at how much your child will grow and learn when you allow them to be able to go off on their own and start figuring out how to do things on their own, because they will grow quickly.
How empowering is that? My goodness, Jacob. I mean, we could talk all day. I was so impressed with your work and
Thank you.
the work that, my goodness, and how you've worked alongside your dad, and just what you've brought forward here. I think every, school should be teaching young people this way and approaching life this way. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your book and be part of your community?
The best way to get a hold of me would either be through our website, the website of the nonprofit that I support, which is leadaz.org, leadaz.org. And that's our website. Or you can email me at jacob.k@leadaz.org.
And why don't you share a little bit about the nonprofit? We'd love to hear about that.
So the nonprofit's whole purpose, I had 2 PhD students. They started this nonprofit with the whole objective of helping young students figure out who they are. These PhD students, they went through undergrad and graduate courses that I taught. And off of learning it impacted their life so much, even though I was really teaching them business principles. that they thought if we would have known these ideas when we were in high school, our lives would have been so much easier, less stressed, and we would have been more successful. And so they won some competitions, started this Leadership Society of Arizona, and the whole objective is to support and mentor youth from the K-12 education and help them become more successful.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne, for having me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kashiwagi. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, NoInfluence Mentoring, Understanding Teenagers and Encouraging Their Success. NoInfluence Mentoring is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and select indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.